live.
Yay, here we are.
So excited. So Lisa Gates, Stacey Gordon, back again. For those of you that used to listen to our Inclusionomics podcast, we're just missing Thiele.
We're really missing Thiele. She's going to be here somewhere, I hope. Yeah.
I know. She's a big way to get paychecks now, so she's left us. We love you, Thiele. So excited to chat with Lisa. I feel like we used to talk all the time. We were getting ready for the podcast and we were talking about all these wonderful, great topics. And then it was like silence.
I know. Well, life goes on and you've got a book and you were writing, you had your head down for months. So here you are coming back to life, right?
Yes, excited. So I want to introduce Lisa Gates because for those of you who don't know Lisa, I don't know how that is the case because Lisa's got like 20 million more followers than I do. And so everyone knows Lisa Gates of Story Happens Here. And this is her website, storyhappenshere.com. She is fabulous, but I'm going to let you just tell us a little bit about yourself, Lisa.
Well, thanks. I thought you were going to do that. Don't we hate it when we have to talk about ourselves? So, yeah, I coach women on helping them control their narrative and learn how to tell workplace or career stories so that they can rise up, right? All those things like how to answer the question, tell me about yourself, or things that you do in interviews, answering those questions, how to get a promotion, a raise, all of that. So that story happens here. Your story happens here.
Awesome. And so as hopefully you know, I'm Stacey Gordon of Rework Work. And today we are talking about tackling unconscious bias, right? We're going to be talking about tips to do that. We're talking about who's at your table. And so as we're talking about just creating inclusion in your career, right? This is an interesting conversation that we're going to have because part of talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of times we talk about the workplace as though it's this amalgamous thing, right, that has a life of its own. But the workplace is the people.
Right.
And so that's what we kind of want to talk a little bit about today. And also introduce the book, which I'm so excited about to have this conversation. And I just want to see who is joining us today. I am seeing Jamil, good morning. Tanya, good morning. Sarah, good morning. How are you doing? Hi, Richard. Good to see you all. I would do these lives and see people coming in from all around the world. So excited to just keep telling us hello, say hello, and we'll check in. If you've got questions, throw them in. So let's kind of get started with this conversation, Lisa. I know you read the book, which thank you.
Yeah, Stacey's book on bias it's just like, the way you speak, the way you talk, the way you take no prisoners, and are really pointed about getting people to listen and really tackle this. So we'll talk a little bit more about the book, but really my favorite part of it is that it sounds just like Stacey. And also, what we wanted to do today was, if you were working in an organization where the leadership has not embraced fully or committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and anything like that, these are tactics that you can use right now as a human being in your workplace, encountering the daily paper cuts of bias.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about who's at the table, right, we immediately think board seats, right? We think these large, big things. We think CEO, leadership, who's at the top of the table. But I think part of that is just who is in your meeting, right?
Right.
And who's at your lunch table. I mean, I know COVID, haven't had lunch together in a while, but.
Yeah, and even before that, who's at the recruiting table, right? Who's at the hiring table? So it's a whole spectrum of tables. And yes. So can we just throw out the table?
Well, I was going to say, so I don't remember where I saw this, and I'm sure many people have posted something similar, but we're in Women's History Month, right? And somebody posted, you know what, forget trying to get a seat at the table, F the table, right?
That's right. We're blowing up the table.
And I thought,
So-
yes, that's what we need, but it's maybe a little too much, right? We have to go to a job. Or at the end of the day, we've got to pay our bills. We have to go to a job. So we need to go to a place where we belong.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the big part of why I wrote Unbiased is that we need to take the bias out of our workplaces. Of course, we can't eradicate it. I'm not making claims that we can do that, right? But we can definitely lessen it. We can identify it. We can interrupt it. And I think not only can we do it, but we have an obligation to do it.
Yes, I agree. I would love to, I want to read a little section of your book. And this is just a short piece that deals with microaggressions, micro messages, micro inequities. And I love that you say nobody cares if you understand the definition of microaggression or micro inequity. But what people do care about is how you treat them. They care that you listen. They care that you pay attention to the cues that are apparent and that you step up or you step in to help. They care if you ask questions when you don't understand and apologize when you make a mistake. They care that you listen and don't ignore their concerns. So then the last sentence is, there are ways that you as a leader can not only learn to respond to these messages, but can help your team to do the same as well. And so it's really about a conflict resolution process that gets behind the sort of intent versus impact problem, right? And you've got an acronym called PAUSE, and I want you to unravel that. And I thought maybe a good example would be, let's say you're about to give a presentation, your team is going to give a presentation tomorrow, and your boss says something like, could you just wear your hair back in a bun tomorrow, right? Or all men wear suits, women, you wear dresses. It's some stupid thing like that. So
right.
How do you unpack that?
Yeah, and we come across these kinds of things all the time, right? These things, microaggressions that they are the small things that doesn't have you running to HR to say, oh my goodness, I need to file a complaint, but leaves you feeling ticked off, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of got under your skin and you're like, did they just say that? What was the intent, right?
Right.
So the idea is to think about using an acronym we call PAUSE, right, to respond. So if you want to process what you're feeling. So a lot of times, again, like I said, you might hear this thing, you might hear something and go, what was that, right? And do I need to respond in the moment? And so a lot of times we rush in to fill in the space of quiet. We think we have to say something right away. And we think that if we don't address it immediately, then the moment's passed, it's too late, we've lost our opportunity. And then we're beating ourselves up all week long. I should have said something. I should have said something. Why didn't I say something? I could have said this. I should have said that, right? So the idea is that we can come back to it. You can process what you're feeling. You might be too angry in the moment to respond. And it's okay to wait a beat in that moment and respond, or come back to it later. You can come back 2 days later and say, Lisa, we had a meeting a couple of days ago where you said X, right? You can come back to it. And I think that pause is to ask, right? Ask if you heard correctly. So you want to get some clarification and say, well, you said X. Did I hear you correctly? Because sometimes we don't hear correctly. Sometimes our brain fills in the blanks and what we think we heard is not what the person said.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I get this a lot, right? I get this a lot. People will email me and say, you said X about me. And I'm like, no, I actually did not. Never, nowhere did I say that.
Well, and it's important that, we're so used to just sort of stuffing things down and hearing them through our own filters and our own biases and this is different from intent versus impact, right? It doesn't matter what you intended. The way I feel when you say X, when you actually, after you ask and clarify.
Right.
Right.
And that's, exactly. So that the you in pause is to understand, right? You need to really understand, what are they trying to convey? So that's where you can get to, what was their motivation? And you want to assume positive intent, right?
Right.
When you think about the microaggression of, you speak so eloquently, there is positive intent behind it. So I'm not going to claw your eyes out. Right? But I am going to say, well, when you say that, what is it that you're trying to convey?
Yes.
Right? Because what they're probably trying to convey is that they like the sound of my voice, or they like that I'm able to tackle tough topics, or that I'm able to make people feel at ease, or, you know, whatever. I don't know. There's a bunch of different reasons that, or things that come from that, but I can't make those assumptions. I need to ask, right?
Yes.
And then I need to hear how that impacts me. I need to say, well, when you say, Stacey, you speak so eloquently, that affects me in this way. And how that is that it continues to bring up and makes it seem as though you were surprised that I speak so well.
Right.
I'm sure is not your intent, right? And then you've got to explore some ways to reframe that statement so they won't repeat the mistake. So you can say, you know, what are some other ways, you know, in the future, if you want to make this as a compliment for somebody, let's look at some ways that that can come across. So some of the examples I already gave, right, is that you were able to take concepts and make it simple, or some people just say, I actually like the sound of your voice, right? It's soothing. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Am I putting people to sleep?
Yeah, it just sort of verges on, it's an easy one to run away from, the example you gave, and to not be honest around, right? It's sort of, I don't know, I'm thinking of lots of examples of ways that people sort of skirt around being direct about the bias that they did hold. Like nobody really wants to say, well, I don't know, I just, you know, saw a Black person and usually they talk in X way, right?
Right.
You might hear that. They might be honest with you, and that would be great. It's like, wow, you just unraveled that for yourself.
But I think in that instance, though, that might be the case. It could be, but it really, that's why I said we assume the positive intent, right? Which is that the person really is trying to give a compliment. So where is the positive in that, and have them explain it. And as they explain it, they then realize themselves, right? You don't have to point it out and say, you think this because you have negative stereotypes about Black people, right? And go down this path.
Yes.
It's not necessary, because in them having to explain it for themselves and having to think through it, they're realizing that. And so that's enough, right?
Yes.
Usually to be able to help counteract it without, you know, I always like to say confront without being confrontational, right? That's what this does. It confronts the issue without it being confrontational, without really putting somebody on the spot. And it allows for dialogue, right? We can have dialogue together where we don't have to be yelling at each other. We don't have to be, you know, one side against the other. We can actually have, you know, an adult conversation. Imagine that.
Right. And two people changed as a result is what's possible. I think it's important to point out that pause, I'm going to just repeat them: process, ask, understand, share, and explore alternatives, is a basic conflict resolution process for anything, right? It will work in any kind of upset or you know, conflict situation. So it's not specific to race or specific to, you know, whatever ism we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, Eva, for putting it in the comments.
Thank you. Oh, good for her. Yeah. Now, I also want to dive into the framework in your book. It's laid out in such a way that from awareness is section 1, action is section 2, and advocacy is section 3. So you want to dive into that a little bit for us so we can understand?
You know, I wrote the book because, and I keep saying the book, right? I don't think I've even said it's unbiased, right? Addressing unconscious bias at work. This is it showed up at my doorstep a couple days ago, and I was like, yes, it's here. So,
and it's pretty.
It is pretty. I like it. The idea is that, you know, last year, 2020, and I keep saying this was like a dumpster fire of a year, right? We had so many things going on, but one of the major things was the murder of George Floyd. And so when that happened, for whatever reason, you know, everyone wanted to jump into action. They were like, we need to do something. And they just started, you know, the three things that came up over and over again was unconscious bias training, hire a chief diversity officer, start a DEI council. Like literally it was like there was a template somewhere that somebody downloaded and started handing out to CEOs.
This will make us look good. This
is what everyone was doing.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't say that those are bad things to do, right? They're not. But I do say that if you look at the framework, action is the third phase. It's not the first, right? The first is awareness. Awareness is the first phase because we have to start with understanding what is happening in the workplace, right? Why is it happening? What are our systems? What are our employees feeling? Those of you who are sitting in jobs, you come into work every day. Do you feel like you belong? And if you don't, why not, right? And what can be done to change that? And so that's
really listening to people, taking measures. You talk about surveying or having fireside chats or, whatever it is, they're fireside chat.
I love
that we, that there's an expansive way of listening before you do anything else, really getting your arms around what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, even right now, right? We've had these mergers in Atlanta of the Asian American women. And it's the same thing. I heard clients asking, well, what do we do? What do we say? And I'm like, don't just put out a statement, right? You need to listen to your employees and ask how you can actually support. What is it you can do to provide help? And so what was happening is everyone would jump into action. So if we start with awareness, right? Looking at the engagement surveys, having listening circles, having dialogues, talking and getting data and getting that information, then we get to this alignment stage. Alignment's the second stage where it's like, okay, the leaders have gotten aware, they're hearing, they're listening, and now they are creating a strategy and using that data to inform the strategy so that when they get to the third stage, which is action, they're actually acting on data that works for their company, not on industry data, not on data for their competitors, but on what their individual company looks like. So I think like that's what the framework is for, is just to remind us that, yes, we want action, but we want authentic action, right? We want sustainable action. And that's what the advocacy part is about getting finally to the state of advocacy, because we've already now done these things. We've gone through awareness, alignment, and action, and now we have to keep it sustainable.
And so what would advocacy look like in action?
That is a hard one because there are so few people in it, right? There is actually a blueprint that I have put out there for the framework on my website, and you can take the assessment. It asks you a few questions that help you to start to, to decide, like to figure out where are we. And so with advocacy, it's in this state of you've already gone through all of these things and you have a culture that is inclusive, but now you've got to keep it going, right? It's like when Salesforce did their pay equity, they leveled out, pay, right, for everybody. And they did their whole audit and they brought everybody up to speed so that they had leveled out pay and they no longer had pay inequity, right? That lasted for like a few months. Why? Because then they had hired more people, they had purchased other companies and brought them in, and those companies had issues, right? So then they realized like, oh, we still have a pay equity problem. Why is that? Right? So advocacy is that state of going, oh, we need to keep doing this, right? You can't do it one time and then say, oh, we're done, right? You've got to keep doing it and keep assessing, right? And go back around to make sure that you are staying in alignment with what you've said that you want to do, right?
Yes, yeah. Do you have any stories that you like to tell that really exemplify a company kind of, where they were in the beginning, problems that they had, and where they arrived after implementing, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, and it's a tough one because we have the stories of people who are doing it in pieces, right? It's the reason our company is called Rework Work, because you have to rework work. And work is recruiting, hiring, onboarding, pay equity, advancement, promotions, right? All these things. And so it is really difficult to be doing well in all phases at all time, right? So definitely there are people, companies we've worked with who we worked with them on their talent acquisition, right? And so now their talent acquisition teams are working better. They're working more in alignment with their hiring managers. And so that's a good first step, right? And they're moving. Yes. But then if those hiring managers aren't also looking at advancement, right, and how they are we're talking about seats at the table, how they're putting people onto teams, how they're making sure that their teams are diverse, how they are assigning projects to people, right, how people are getting raises, then the work that the talent acquisition team is doing is great, but it's like in recruiting when you've got a leaky bucket, right? You keep pouring stuff in the top of the bucket, but stuff's falling out the bottom.
Yeah. That makes me think also of the individuals. So I'm thinking about everybody watching right now who working in whatever organizations you're working in. Let's say you're applying for a new role or a promotion in your company, but more likely a new role. Obviously, the things that you do, like looking for news about the company, examining who their leadership team is. Are they all white men? Are they, is it diverse? And trying to create a list of questions that you need to ask in order to find out where they are in the spectrum of awareness, I guess. Asking what is the makeup of the team I'd be joining? What are growth and development opportunities? And I always wonder about this. What do you say to directly asking in an interview process, what is your commitment to DEI? And what does it look like in your company? What does it look like in action?
It's a hard one because I've seen debates about this with recruiters. I'm in a couple of different groups, right? And somebody actually posted this a few months ago. It was kind of funny. And they said that somebody came in and had this attitude of like, well, what are you doing to, to support D&I? And I realized that it's not so much about asking, it's all in how you ask, right? Yes. A lot of what we say gets under people's skin because we do it with an attitude.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And so I think that part of it is we've got to, again, positive intent. Remember, positive intent. That's always helpful because if we go in, the attitude comes because we're assuming negative intent, right?
Right.
And if we can go in assuming positive intent, then we can say, well, what I have seen that you've done X, Y, and Z, right? So showing that I've done my homework.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so starting with that and saying, I've seen that you've done this and this and this, and that looks really great. And what else are you doing to promote, right? Or how is that contributing to your initiatives around DEI? Or how long have you been doing this, right? So making it not so confrontational, right? You can ask the questions, but it's just about how we put that out into the world. Yeah.
You just made me think of another story in your book, and this would be with the clients that I work with, I would want them to ask the question of what's your onboarding process like, right? Because that's like one of the first places where you either feel included or feel some sense of belonging or not. And you have a great story in your book.
Yeah, I think onboarding is an interesting one because when I think a lot of people don't really understand what onboarding is supposed to be. And I remember when I used to work at Prudential, my onboarding process was not very good, right? I came into work and my manager wasn't there. And she'd kind of forgotten that I was coming in that day and I didn't have a laptop ready and all these different things. Now, after working there for a while, I realized why some of that was an issue, right? Because we were in a very regulated industry and you were not allowed to get assigned a laptop until you had come in, you had signed all this paperwork, it had been submitted back to home office, then they had to do a bunch of stuff, and then it would take 3 days for the laptop to get to you. So you would do that on a Monday, you'd get your laptop on a Friday. But these are the things that if you explained that in advance, it would be helpful to know, right?
Exactly. What to expect, right? But right. Also the sort of carelessness about not really having any attention to the process.
Right.
or like the impact of these. It's seemingly small thing, but it's huge.
And so right now, like, so there's a question, from, I think it was, Shawla's asking, can we take action from home and from classrooms? Yes, you can take action from home. And if we use onboarding as an example, you might be remote onboarding somebody right now. How do you do that? Send them a basket of office supplies, right? With a little note that says, welcome to the team, right?
Yeah.
Send them something so that they know, like, okay, it's first day on the job. What does that look like? Some of the companies, I love how they do videos of team members welcoming, just saying, hi, I'm your new team member. This is what I do. This is how my job relates to your job, right? These are things that we do. And even when you're not remote onboarding, that's still helpful for people who are in the office, right?
Yes,
Because
yeah.
you meet so many people. Yes, you're going to walk somebody through a maze of cubicles, right? Introduce them to 50 new faces, and then expect that they're going to remember who all these people are. So giving them backup of like a little video introduction is helpful because it helps them reinforce what they've learned. So I think there's some ways that we can do stuff like that. So
do we have more questions that we might want to address from?
I'm just looking through.
I cannot see the chat, so that's cuckoo.
I don't see additional questions. I see lots of hellos, hi. And I see Lark is in Barbados. I'm like, Lark, weren't you in Brazil or Colombia or something? So I just love that you are hop skipping around the world. That's awesome. I would love to be in Barbados. I think that, I want to just, I'm going to throw this up here because I've got to tell everybody about the book, right? Like, so please, if you have not, I saw some people have said they've pre-ordered. Thank you so much.
And it comes out the 30th of this month. Yeah.
March 30th. Okay. So a couple of days. It's actually, for those of you that have pre-ordered, it's probably arriving. I've gotten some messages from people saying that it's here. So they're excited about that.
We're going to make it number one. We're going to make it the most important book of the year. And how we think we're going to do that. You want to reveal our little strategy?
Well, we were having, so Lisa and I, we always joke. We have fun. And we were talking about this yesterday. And we said, and I was telling her that my sister said, you know what, you just need Oprah to just mention your book. And I said, well, who knows Oprah, right? I don't know anyone that knows Oprah. And so we were talking about it. And Lisa's like, well, you could just tweet at Oprah. And so I said, that's a great idea. We should all do it. So I'm going to ask everyone here, right, who is on listening live today, or even if you end up watching this later and listening, send a tweet to Oprah. Send a link to the book. It's unbiasedbook.com, and just tell her, like, hey, Oprah.
Hey, Oprah, you got to read this book. And you got to know Stacey Gordon.
So that's our goal today. We are going to send a tweet storm to Oprah. I'm sending one as soon as we end in a moment here. Lisa's going to send one too. And so join us in tweet storming Oprah. Hey, how you doing?
Alternatively, you could drive up. It'd take you about an hour and a half from where you are. You drive up to Santa Barbara, Montecito, and you just camp out until you see her on the street, right?
That's true. I hear she's in the grocery stores around there. So
she has a house where I live now. So I live on Orcas Island in the San Juan Islands in Washington, and Oprah lives here too. I haven't seen her around, but I'm hoping.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate this. It's such a great time to chat and connect. It's always fun to talk to you and to do it live. So hello to all of Lisa's followers. Hello to all of my followers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope you got something out of the framework that we discussed. And as usual, if you have questions, feel free to send me a message. Just know that my LinkedIn messages have been filling up quite a bit. So it might take a while for me to get back to you, but I usually do try to get back to everyone. So thank you all.
All right.
I'm going to end today's broadcast.
Thank you.
Bye.